Hello and welcome to the Open News, the weekly show that covers all things tech and open source. In today's episode, we're covering the following news stories. PinePhone Beta Edition now available for pre-order, Gnome 40 desktop released, PanVK Vulkan drivers for Mali GPUs announced, and more. Right now on the Open News. If you enjoyed this video, consider joining Odyssey, the freedom-respecting alternative to YouTube. Links in the description. So for our first news story, we have this. PinePhone Beta Limited Edition is available for pre-order with Manjaro Linux. So indeed, once again, you can now get your hands on the PinePhone, the inexpensive smartphone running Linux. And this time, if you order, you'll get the Beta Edition running Manjaro Linux. Now, from my experience with the PinePhone, I can say that it's a fairly usable experience for the basics, but definitely don't expect it to replace your Android or iOS device anytime soon. That said though, if you want one of these devices, you can get the smartphone for $149.99, which comes with 2GB of RAM and 16GB of storage, or you can get the conversions package for $199.99, which comes with 3GB of RAM and 32GB of storage, as well as a USB-C dock, which will enable you to use the device as your desktop PC. So all in all, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that you get a PinePhone as your daily driver, since it's really just a fun tinker toy at the moment, but I would definitely recommend that you get one for that reason, since they are a really nice piece of hardware. That said though, if you want one of these devices, be sure to act quickly, as pre-orders tend to close very quickly. If you do end up pre-ordering one, your device should be shipped in late April. So for our next story, we have this. Gnome 40 desktop environment officially released. This is what's new. Indeed, the newest update to the Gnome desktop environment has been released, and it brings with it a wide variety of new features. Most notable is the redesign of the activities overview, which makes better use of space, has improved touchpad gestures, and improved app browsing and launching. Gnome 40 also comes with improved performance and revamped GNOME maps and more. So all in all, Gnome 40 is a pretty big release. If you want to try it out, it should be available in your distro's repository at some point, depending on which distribution you're using. The first major Linux distribution to ship with the update by default should be Fedora 34, which will be released in late April of this year. Next up, we have a release which should be appealing to users of Mali GPUs, which is going to include a lot of users of Pine64 devices. Collabora announces PanVK, an open source Vulkan driver for ARM Mali GPUs. Indeed, if you own a device with a Mali GPU, you will soon be able to use Vulkan on that device, thanks to the open source driver for those devices, Panfrost. Sadly, PanVK isn't mature enough to be in the open source Linux GPU driver stack just yet, but hopefully at some point in the future, once it's more mature, we'll see Vulkan rendering support on Mali GPUs. Next up, we have a news story from the people over at KDE. KDE Applications open source software stack rebranded as KDE Gear. Indeed, KDE's suite of applications is being rebranded as KDE Gear. It's certainly a more unique name from what they had before, but I can't help but feel that maybe it's less descriptive than when it used to be called KDE Applications. But certainly it's still an interesting renaming. And with that said, that's all we have time for on today's episode of the Open News. Be sure to tune in next week for more Open News. But with that said, thanks for watching.